Good evening and welcome to the latest episode of the Eve Prosper Market Show. I'm your host Lockefox, and I'm here with all of the market news you need to know going into the weekend here for episode 89. So let's start where we always do, talk some quick show news. I want to thank everybody who is tuned in live right now. We are broadcasting on both Twitch and YouTube. You can catch us at our new in-game time, same U.S. time at 0300 Eve time, Friday nights. That's Thursday night, 8 o'clock Pacific. We're here every week with all of the best market news that Eve has to offer. If you want to follow the show, all you got to remember is Eve Prosper. That'll get you to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and our blog. We should have some more content coming out, and if you are interested in some of our dev fleet topics, I do encourage you to check that out. I do have a blog up there that's a couple weeks old where we talked about the forecasting we're trying to build into one of our tools. So if any of that dev fleet stuff tickles you, you should go check that out. If you want to get engaged with our community, we do have a Discord. The very best way to get in touch with me is there on Discord. Links to join should be down in the doobly-doo below. And last, I want to thank our patrons who keep us on the air week over week. This show is provided ad-free. It does take a considerable amount of work to produce. We do spend a lot of off-air time developing custom code. We're running on custom server hardware that we've built up in one of our guys' basements, and it does cost money to keep us in licenses and everything, and I've got to thank our patrons. Even $1 goes an extremely long way, and I got to thank you guys so much for that. If you can't support us directly, that is perfectly fine. Completely understand. Do be sure to get subscribed, though, because like every good market person, I like seeing numbers going up and to the right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the meat of it. I know we usually transition out of here, but people on YouTube have been shitty about when the show actually starts, and so all of those people who scrub past the show news to get straight to Plex are going to miss all of the news about the Plex split, because I'm just that pithy about it. So if you guys saw on Twitter and the dev blog, it's been announced that CCP will be splitting Plex by a factor of 500, and they haven't announced an exact time scale for that, but expect it soon. Given the language going around, I would expect May, or with whatever the major release is in the late May, mid-June kind of area. So let's start with the mechanics of it. So what's going to happen is that every Plex that you have going into the night of the change is going to be multiplied by 500, and it's now going to cost 500 Plex to keep your Omega status. So this is just like a stock split IRL. So there's no value lost per se, just the token becomes more granular. Next, if you have ARM in your account, all the ARM in 100 ARM blocks, I believe north of 1,000 ARM, will be converted into the new Plex at the regular conversion factor, seeing as it's one Plex makes 3,500 ARM. You do the math. So this should make things that this is going to put a lot more mini Plex back into the system. It's going to liquidate out ARM, and we're finally going to be rid of ARM, which I have been waiting for a very long time. So last, if you have Plex on market on the night of the change, what's going to happen is that your orders will all be canceled, and the items will be split, and then you'll have to relist all of your stuff, but all of your fees will be refunded, so you won't lose any money. So I'm actually pretty excited for this change. I've made it known that I particularly like a more granular token system. This gives people the ability to trade in the Plex market at much smaller increments, so that you can, for instance, just put 500 million into the market and be trading in, blocks of 100 Plex instead of one Plex at a time. This gives a lot more flexibility for volatility because with the lowered price at about 2 million ISK per miniplex, this means that the swings are going to be less. They're going to hurt less as Plex swings. It's going to make it so that you look at the market and you'd say, well, Plex is 3 million. I mean, whatever, like it was 2 million a month ago, it's 3 million this month. Why should I care? But that does mean that going from 2 to 3 million is going from 1 billion to 1.5 billion in Omega costs. So, I think that's going to leave more room for more volatility because it's going to take an extra tenth of a second for people to do the calculations in their heads. Also, this gives CCP a little better framework to give bonuses and extra services and such at much smaller steps. And if you wanted to be a enterprising person for your corporate alliance, handing out much smaller pieces of Plex as rewards, as pieces of your SRP, makes a lot more sense. You could be using these tokens more directly because they're in units of 2 million or 3 million or 1.5 million. And that gives you a little easier flexibility for getting cash out if you wanted to go do that. So I'm a big fan of the things. The one piece that makes me upset is that they have stated that they're not going to backfill the data in the market window onto the new items. So if you're not an Eve developer, you may not know that every item has a unique integer ID. And so what will happen in the back end is that Plex will go from one number and then it will get a new number, and that new number will now take over. So they'll discontinue one item, they'll add a new item, even if the names stay the same. That's kind of what ends up happening. But that means when the market window opens on day 1 or day 10 or any time after that, is that there's no history into the back of what the history of Plex has been in game. And seeing as this is just a stock split, seeing as this is a pretty benign mechanical change, I don't see why they couldn't, in this one case, inject the history back into the database, so that you'll divide the price by 500 and you'll multiply the volume by 500, and then you'll still have a continuous graph looking back. It'll just be semi-artificial. I've gone ahead and made my desire for that known. We are going to treat it on this show. We're gonna look at it two different ways. We're gonna look at what the cost to be Omega is as a primary thing, because I think it's important to keep that in mind, to keep that scale in mind before you get boiled like a frog. And number 2, we will still look at the new Plex item, but we will backfill it in our databases as if it weren't. And that's so we'll be tracking both going forward, and we will do all of the work in the back end to just make it transparent. I'm going to go ahead and talk to Eve Mogul to make sure that any of the services we provide through them also continue to see that sort of behavior. Now, the real thing you guys want to know about is what's going to happen to the price of Plex. Holy crap. So, if you really, really want to know, and you want to dig into it and get really down in the dirt for your tinfoil hat wearing, you do want to go look up stock splits. What I expect to see is hype as we go into this weekend, over the next week or so, probably into FanFest, where people are looking to stockpile Plex in the hopes that they will get to do something on split day. So what we end up seeing is that there's hype going into the split. The split happens, but no value is created or destroyed by the split. But what we do see on split day is new ARM coming into the market, which should amp supplies. And I still think that given the monthly economic numbers we've seen, that Plex is on a downward trend into May. Unfortunately, without the news from FanFest, it's really, really hard to make predictions past the end of May in my books. So I'm kind of hoping that we see the ramp up to 1.1, 1.2 maybe. I have a hard time saying 1.2. And we see that exuberance start to evaporate as people get impatient waiting for the release. And then the release happens. There's another bit of a surge, but what I think is going to happen is the price is going to dip down towards a 950 parity level. And then wherever we land should stay relatively steady over the summer, without knowing what the event schedule looks like. Again, that's about the best I can do. So, if you're looking to speculate in Plex, I mean, if you can get the cheap ones, do it. But I'm worried about jumping in at 1.1 because I don't think you're going to get a lot of action to play with. Instead, I'm going to be looking at markets like skill trading, like the other RM tokens, and skins, which we don't cover on the show. I think are all going to be much better places to sort of play the secondary metagame instead, because people all the looking is on Plex, and it's going to get really bumpy in my opinion, and that's just the way I sort of expect it to be. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the real meat of the show. I know all the YouTube people have been so patient, seeing as I just spent 10 minutes. Let's go ahead and do one more quick round on the CSM voting. That these are still our candidates. Again, just real quick rundown. Rodin is our pick. If you would vote for me, you should vote for Rodin. He is our economic trade sort of candidate. He is excellent at what he does, and we support him. Commander A's is my pick for you generalists, for your jack of all trades kind of guys. He is our pick in that slot. And last is Arika Mizune in an industrialist slot and an accessibility slot. Last, I do want to take back the mean things I said about Fuzzy Steve. He's back on my good side after we talked about some of the ESI stuff. Holy crap, that's the last piece of news I forgot to share. If you are a spreadsheet warrior, go check out Fuzzworks' blog. Steve Veronican, who's running for CSM re-election, is the API candidate. You should check out his blog because he just released a tool set for ESI on GDocs. So if you are a spreadsheet warrior, he has the tools to get you in the latest with the latest and greatest APIs. I'm really glad he did it because there was no way I was going to get to it, and he and I have traded GDoc stuff for ages, and I'm really glad that he brought that to the thing. So go check out. I should have links in the description below to get to it, but just go to fuzzwork.co.uk, and he has a blog up about it. It's great, excellent. Go do it. All right, into the meat of the show. Let's talk about Plex. Plex is going completely nuts. So we see it at 1.15 billion ISK as of this broadcast, which means I have to eat my words about 1.2 earlier. We are on track. So right now we are in a regiment of much stronger moves than you'd expect. And and volumes are not that high given how high the price is driving. And again, if we look at the 1 year, so the thing that makes me queasy here is that Plex can spend time up in this very strong space above the RSI line here. That's totally normal. But we are much higher than we've been over the last year, and we show no signs of stopping given the way things are going. Also, if you are a tinfoil chewer, the Plex split announcement came out, and the action was already over before it showed up, which is suspicious, if I may be so bold. I don't know. I can't nail down the specifics of any leak. I did ask Fuzzy Steve about it, and basically he said what I expected to hear was that CSM has been talking about this forever and ever, and I was under the impression that they weren't going to get a date on it. So, and that's kind of that's sort of the behavior I would expect. And somebody spilled the beans a few days early. Now, do note that, so I wouldn't count this block from last week to be suspicious. We've been in a bit of a shortage lately, and that's sort of this sort of behavior right here is expected. But basically, somebody had 36 hours. The party started 36 hours earlier than I would have expected. And especially this buyout. Actually, my alignment might be bad here. No, my alignment is bad because the database is in Eastern time, not UTC time. So I got to move this back. So this buyout should be aligned with this line. That's my bad. It's a bug. Welcome to home dev. But we just crested the 1.2 billion. So you might be able to get lucky with a 1.1, 1.12 buy order into the weekend. Like if you're watching this from when we air to, let's say, 1800 on Friday, then there might be a chance to get a sub 1.15 buy order if you wanted to play the weekend, because what ends up happening a lot of these times is that we see a double dip where news comes out and people who have jobs can't do anything about it, and then we see the weekend warriors come in and spike it again. With how thin the supplies are on the ground, we could actually see a pop up to 1.3 if things got particularly hairy. But if you're going to jump on this train, you got to be active. Like you cannot be jumping in on this and just expect to show up after golf or whatever. You really need to take your active play time and be watching this market for your out, because the space above 1.2 I think is going to be really rare, and it's going to take some lightning reflexes and some opportunistic sell orders to really cash out north of 1.2 in my opinion. I'm probably going to eat those words. It's a really weird spot to be predicting in, unfortunately. So I don't know how better to put this where we are right now. And then zooming in on the RMT markets, somebody bought out the pilot resculpt certificates and blew out my graph. So thank you, whoever that was. So now this graph is useless, and I have to do some trimming to call that number right there, because that's fucking ridiculous. Next, looking at skill trading, we see the behavior we expect to see as Plex rises. Margins fall. We're still at pretty decent ISK per skill point, but we've lowered to about 100, 150 ISK per skill point bonus. So this is why particularly I'm interested in watching the skill injector market, because I think you'll get a chance to play some of the leading and lagging in that market. I think it's going to have a little more volatility to play with. and I think it's a little less risky given the where Plex is going to be in a very volatile spot. I think skill trading is going to be a more casual, less painful place to be investing. Zooming in, we can see that the supplies have surged and the prices are starting to show some weakness, trending south of 650. This will be a great chance to get a 640 buy order in, grab a few extra of these things, and watch, because what I expect to happen is that once the farmers sort of realize what's going on, like I expect the prices to do a better wave, in my opinion. So I don't know if we'll get all the way to 700. 700 probably we can hit. But I think this is a much better place to be speculating in than Plex, because as you can see, the waves are much less pronounced. They're going to be more regular as opposed to spiky in this case. Looking at the big picture, let's take a look at some market indexes. Looking at the net trade statistics, we don't have today's action in the report, just a function of time zones not really matching up. So sorry about that. So I wish I could come in and say, oh, well, look, there's all this action on the RMT market. But what I can tell you is that this green line up here is going to surge, and so is the top purple line. But I don't expect much action here on the mineral and ship market. Actually, I'm a little sad I don't have the data on the sheet right now, because there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the mineral markets now that the Rorqual nerf hit. So we're going to talk about that in a little more depth coming up here when we get into minerals. But we're seeing some recovery in those markets, and as the minerals rise, I expect the value of ships to rise, which should bring up that ship market number a few points as the market starts to recover. So looking at the total destruction numbers, again, not a lot to say here. What we can see is the Burn Jita stats here a couple weeks back, and we're settling back into a bit of a lull. The kill stats are a bit lower than I'd like to see them. We were at 15,000 kills per day on average, and we're now more in a 12,000 kills per day. This is sort of the thing that's got me upset at the numbers, is that we're seeing a lot of productivity, we're seeing a lot of mining and industry, but we're not seeing a proper amount of destruction to go with that. And as those stocks stack higher and higher, you're going to have people like alphas are going to have a really hard time keeping the bills paid with low tier industry. And I mean, nobody's really entitled to a particular, ISK per hour. But if, we all know what's the first thing you do when you come into Eve, you get in a mining frigate and you crunch rocks, because that's what people do. And if your first encounter into Eve is, man, mining rocks, let's see, I'd have to mine 24/7 for the whole month to get anywhere near Omega status. This game sucks. So, I don't, I just want to see, industry for alphas be at least interesting enough to keep them engaged, because Eve is the worst single player game, and the stuff that people land on in their first careers is going to be the thing that gets hurt the most by this excess productivity. So, speaking of mining, let's go into minerals. And Tritanium saw a decent bump just in the last 24 hours, coming off the 4.0 line and hitting 4.5 right before broadcast. We're seeing a surge in strength, which means that I wouldn't expect to get above 465 if we're just following the indicators. Again, this is after a reset. So with a discontinuity, I'm okay with crossing these boundaries. Like, patch comes out, things change, prices have to reset, and they reset pretty quickly in Eve. So we could get up to 465, 47, but that's a really hard spot to see, and especially from where we're sitting today, it's a really risky position. And if we look at the zoom in, we can see that we're sort of coalescing to 4.5, and supplies haven't really changed. So again, like a 4.55, a 4.60 is kind of where I expect this to land, given the pressure that we're seeing right now. Pyrite is staying steady despite the spikes we're seeing elsewhere in the mineral market, which is a little bit weird at 6.0. Just before the show, we popped up to 625, which is great, and we're seeing volumes decline. So if you're watching live now, if you can get onto the market before 1800, 2000 hours in Eve tomorrow, this might not be a bad place to get a like a sub 6.0 buy order in and aim for 6.5. It's not quite 10%, so you're not going to make a huge amount, but we could hit 6.5 to 6.75 over the next week, given what we're seeing in the mineral reset here. I have a hard time saying 7.0, but it's possible. It's just unlikely. Next, one of our favorites, Mexilon, saw a spike last week, despite the sort of expectation that the supply chain should be a little bit saturated post-Burn-Jita. But we're back down under the 75 mark. If we zoom in, we can see a big buyout that was not caught on the gross stats, and a bit of a shortage going on. So if you were holding on to Mexilon, if you bought your Mexilon last week at sub 75, like I really hope I said that, selling at over 80 is a nice price. I'd be shooting for an 80-85 if I were getting out of this market. Particularly good returns. I didn't expect this to turn around as quickly as it did. It'd be easy to hip shot and say that this is because of the Rorqual change, but remember that most of Mexilon comes from HiSec, and there are no Rorquals in HiSec. So it's interesting to see this spiking despite everything. It might just be a bit of a supply chain shock for super producers, but like we're not overly short at the moment. I mean, we got pretty short a couple weeks ago during Burn-Jita, and we're still like at half a billion units on market, so it's not completely bought out, but it's in an unstable spot, and we might see a little bit more action going into the weekend. Next, Isogen, the mineral I shit on every week, was down at 50 and is heading to 55. Again, I think this is part of the Rorqual shift, but the action seems to be over. We saw a dip during the release, and volumes are climbing. So if you were holding on to this, if you bought in at 45, 47, even though I tell you not to trade in Isogen, get out now. I would jump off of this train as fast as possible, because I think we're going to be back at sub 50 come Monday. Next, Noxium, which has been a little bit of a mixed bag. I keep wanting to tell people to buy into it. I keep, like, my gut says to buy it, but I just can't justify it. Did a big pop moving from 320 to 360 this week. And we can see it's basically on the back of a supply shortage. It looks like we'll stay steady at 360 over the weekend. But any more growth would require more material to be lost out of the market. I have a hard time believing we're going to get much below the 100 million units mark, but like, I mean, if you did buy some Noxium at some of this 320 buy order or the sub 300, I think I asked to buy it earlier in the last 2 weeks. I would be watching the order count on Eve Central for us to go under the 100 million mark into like the 95 million. I think means that we get to 380, and that's when I'd be selling. You could sell now, you could make your money. You know, nobody's going to. It's not wrong to take profits if you're making over your fees, but I think that there's a better than 50-50 chance that we could hit 380 if the supply chain gets a little bit tighter over the next 10 days. Next, my other favorite mineral to shit on is Zydrine, and we're back at 1,000. We're holding pretty steady. Actually, we should expect the prices to come up slightly thanks to the Rorqual nerf. We should see less of this stuff coming out of nullsec. I still think it's going to be in an oversupplied paradigm, given that I expect wormholers to just mine the best ISK per hour regardless of what it goes into. So what I kind of expect is over this weekend, we'll get to maybe 1.015, maybe 1.1 over the next 2 weeks. But I think by May, we're back under 1K. I don't think this is a really good one to be investing in, and I don't think it's a good time to be stockpiling either. So I'd steer clear of Zydrine. Just treat it like you normally would. And Megasite took a dive down under 1350 this last week. And if we zoom in, we can kind of see why. Supplies were tracking way up, and they're starting to back off. This one's a little bit better to be buying into. The opportunity to get some cheap buy orders, I think, is closed, but we should be over 1,400 over the weekend, and we could be on a regiment up to 1,500 over the next 2 to 3 weeks if this trend continues. I kind of expect to sit at the 75 million units mark, which puts us at like 1,450 in my book. So that's not terrible if you got some of these opportunistic buy orders when things looked like they were going down and I told you not to buy. But I don't think we're going to get much above the 1,450 mark. And then last, Morphite is taking a little bit of a dive under the 9,500 mark. And we can see that we're just basically oversupplied. I don't think the Rorqual changes anything about Morphite, in my opinion. What we really need to see is a return to Tech 2. And I might actually have some good news on that this week. So sub 9K buy orders is definitely a buy in my book, but getting to that 10K that we expect to see, I think is going to be a bit of a reach, and you're going to be holding on to it past May, unfortunately. Moving on to fuel. We start where we usually do, looking at the isotopes and ignoring the fact that I have a big fat fucking bug in my tool. And we saw nitrogen isotopes spiking over the last week. And I want to say they're still at almost 900. Again, ignore this last part. I have like a sort issue or something. I've tried to fix it twice and it just doesn't stick. Fuel blocks, we saw a lot of action during Burn Jita. That's where we had the fuel blocks get bought out. But prices are coming back down. We're seeing the margin again shrink into shitty territory for all of the blocks, especially Caldari has been crossing over where it's negative margin. Again, so I bring this up and then we end up talking about it on Discord. So I don't know if you guys are getting this news. So if you're building fuel blocks and it's working out for you and you have like a supply chain figured out, or this saves you a jump freighter step, like keep doing what you're doing, shine on your crazy diamond. That's fine. If you've got a particularly sweet deal on a fee schedule, like go for it. But if you're a casual industrialist, I really have to tell you to get out of fuel blocks, because you're playing a losing battle against people who don't need the margin the way you do. And my advice to beginning industrialists is not to go after the biggest markets so that you can, just do some simple work and make a couple extra bucks and aren't I great? What works really best for beginning industrialists is you really want to maximize the margin you're working with, because as a starting industrialist, you don't have a lot of cash to be working with. And if you're coming into a market and you've got 200 million ISK, let's say, to get started, and you come into the fuel block market and you're making 8%, maybe, let's say you're making 10, but then you're eating 3% in fees and another 2% in taxes. So you're making less than 5%. Like, it's going to take a lot of time to get your money, back, and you're gonna burn out doing that work, because you're like, well, I mean, I did all those clicks and I did all that mining, and like, I just made 10 million ISK. Who gives a shit? So instead, the places I like to point newbies is things like rigs are a pretty decent margin. There's some specialty Tech 1 that isn't terrible. If you're willing to do some freight, ammo isn't terrible. There's some easy Tech 2 that is some pretty low hanging fruit skill wise. And there's a lot of secondary market stuff that is not inherently obvious, but has a lot of margin. Things like the Tech 2 components, like electrolytic capacitors and fusion reactors and those kind of things. And like, as a starting industrialist, like, you should be aiming for 30%, because in that case, if you get 30%, if you're aiming there, that means that you have space to fuck up. So you have a lot of space that if the market turns sideways, you have a lot of runway out before you start losing money. That's number one. And number two, like, you don't need the best skills to make it up. Like, if you're paying an extra 2% in taxes, like, who cares? I have 30% margin to cut through. Like, go ahead, take it, and I'll have 20% returns instead of 5% returns, and really get that money back. Where the people who should be doing the low margin work are the people who are making that margin up in volume. And that's my advice there, is that you sort of transition from a high margin, low value up through high net returns, low absolute margin. And that's sort of the curve you want to transition through. If you don't know where to get started, the Eve tool ISK per hour is the industry standard, and you should go just check it out. Look for things that make a little bit more money for your time, because this market right here, where if you were building Caldari fuel blocks and it goes negative, like, you're fucked, you're boned. If you see like this big cost bump, and then if it resets back to 800, you're screwed. Like, this is not fun. So, like, get some margin that gives you some runway so that if things fuck up, that you don't end up eating your lunch. This is my public service announcement for newbies to not build fuel blocks, because you could be doing so much better with your time. Anyway, zooming in on the rest of the market, looking at nitrogen isotopes, we see a big spike in prices. Looks like somebody is manipulating the price, to be completely honest, up to 900. We're seeing a little bit of shortage, which would tell me that the fair price is 850, but supplies are spiking up. I have complicated feelings about the moon market, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later, that the leaked information on moon mining on the new drilling platforms has me spooked, and has me thinking that anything that has to do with moon reactions is just going in the toilet. And it's so hard to pick, like, how bad it's really going to be. I just look at it and I don't want to touch any of it. I just want to put my hands in the air and be like, that is not a market I'm playing with, because as soon as that news comes out, I think we're going to lose double percentage points off of the value of these things. Seeing this nitrogen spike, like, you should expect some of that because of the Rourke nerf, but you're also seeing the volume spike because people should be getting out of their moon investments, which should be driving the price back down to 800. I'm not sure exactly what shenanigans are going on here to make things go weird, but like, the whole moon picture has me spooked, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere near this in a long-term position. Looking at strontium, the interesting thing I see is that we're seeing supplies start to wane. It's a little hard to put this. It's probably the Rourke nerf, but if we get much below the 15 million mark, I might actually say that the war drums are getting beaten. Without the price moving, I have a hard time really saying that, like, this is a war signal. I know that I like saying that strontium is our canary for nullsec warfare. Some of this looks like reasonably large buyouts, but I need one more week of data to really say anything. It's a 40% positive sort of outlook. Heavy water, we're seeing just stack up and up and up. Again, thanks to the Rourke nerf, it's been stacking since the announcement, and prices just keep falling. We're just not seeing as much of it consumed by miners anymore. So I don't know where the bottom of this is. I don't know where the top of the supply is. If it keeps going, I'm almost expecting a rebalance in the mix of what comes off of ice, given the way that it's going. But those sort of moves take forever, so we'll see what happens. Moving on to our outliers. So this is the part where I contradict myself and say, I think that the moon markets are going to have a double percentage point drop in everything worth making. And then ferrogel spikes, and fermionic condensate spike, and dysprosium spikes, and signals are showing positive trends for hypersynaptic fibers and nanotransistors. So I don't know, maybe I'm the only person who believes this, or maybe somebody knows better than me that the removing of moon reaction farming into the traditional industry system is going to be low throughput, and it's going to do the capping that I keep saying needs to happen, where the total throughput is basically halved. But like, moving into traditional industry from moon reacting means that you need to, like, you'd have to cap the actual yields on those blueprints so hard that I just think that the throughput that traditional industry can do, cutting that down to a level where you actually get the output you want without completely screwing everything up, is going to be difficult. Now, I don't have any special CSM leaks, so I could just be completely fucking wrong. But like, I'm spooked. I don't want to be in this market, but it's really hard to turn away when you see like that spike in ferrogel up here. And dysprosium, for instance, we saw a big drop off as what looks like a set of moons switching hands. But supplies have dipped. Prices have reset back to the 70K mark. I, again, don't want to jump in on this. I don't think we're going to go much above 75K because I think we're back at equilibrium. But like, these markets spook the hell out of me. Going into PI4, again, if you wanted to take a position for the summer patch, PI4 would be a decent place to do it. Nano factories are down big time this week. It'd be a good time to stock up. We do expect them to be part of the mining platform, the drilling platform construction process. We're hoping that lots of drilling platforms explode, meaning that there's a lot more baseline demand in the PI4 market. But I think that this party is particularly played out, and though you can make, I think, a decent living off of it, I don't think you'll get super genius status of watching the big spikes as the market gets bought out. I think we'll just be high once the thing shows up, and I'd be looking to stockpile things like nanofactories, wetware mainframes, and maybe sterile conduits into FanFest in the hopes that the keynote spikes the market and you can jump out right after the keynote. That's sort of the play I expect at the moment. Next, by special request, melted nanoribbons are on this week's docket. As part of the leak about mining platforms, there's a rumored Tech 3 cruiser rebalance, and the markets went a little bit nuts buying out all the melted nanoribbons. But then the supply chain snapped back into place to backfill. Going into the weekend at a 1.5, 1.75 buy order, you might be able to make a decent amount of money looking for a cash out right before FanFest. But it's a risky spot, especially given just how much material is coming onto the market. I think the price is going to dip under the 1.5 mark, and I just don't know when it's going to rebound, because this is steep and fast and hot, and I just don't know. It's hard to tell when it's going to turn around and how it's going to turn around. It's a dangerous pattern, and it's really hard to predict when it's doing exactly this. Next, interesting this week is logistics cruisers. The Guardian took a big spike, and the Scimitar is down, which I think is just a matter of oversupply. The thing I'd be looking for as a producer is to not go rushing into Guardians because they're really hot this week. And as a trader, I'd be looking for the double dip that tends to happen when industrialists get too greedy. I'm not sure if that play is going to really be here. I just thought it was interesting to see the Guardian tracking so high given the rest of the way the logistics cruisers market is going, and how out of favor the Scimitar is. I also kind of expect that more capital logi is going to be like, the next big war is going to be a super capital one. And I don't know where subcaps really go in that engagement chain. And this is a failure on my part to just not have the creativity to understand what the new fleet metas are going to be. But I long-term speculation on logi cruisers seems like a losing game. Next interesting one that came up on our tools was the Viator. I believe that is the Cloaky Hauler Lente, if I'm remembering correctly. We saw... I swear you guys are doing this to me on purpose, where I say twos are common and threes are not. And we saw 2 here, and now we're seeing a third spike. I mean, if you bought in, this weekend's not a bad time to sell, but I don't know why the Viator is so popular going into this weekend. I mean, if you want to really chew the tinfoil, it might be that there's a second round of burn Jitas or some sort of interdiction going on, but like I've heard no murmurs to that actually being true. I don't know if this is like Weekend Warriors coming back. This is strange to see so much extra. Like, this is Burn Jita, right? Like, this is a big buyout for Burn Jita, and then oversupply from industrialists, and then people giving up. Prices, this is weird. I'm not sure exactly what's going on here. Next on our items is the rocket launcher 2s are hot. Not sure what they're being attached to. Didn't see anything shiny and new in our Killboard report. but they seem to be much more popular and breaking out of a traditional mold here. Next, medium nanobot accelerators, which I want to say are the armor repair cycle rate ones, are taking a big nosedive. Again, not sure if this is supply driven or what. Not a bad chance to be buying in if you were looking to speculate at sub 3 million. I would be tempted to buy in. Signals look good for at least making your money back, plus a little bit of margin. I just don't know if we swing way up or if we just flatten out here. 325 is kind of my target given the way things are going. And we'll see what happens next week. I'll try to remember to pull this again to see if I am smart, if I'm a genius or an idiot. Moving on to our prediction review, where we find out if I know what the hell I'm talking about. The Lachesis, I brought this up last week, that it spiked hard and to be wary if you were a producer. And then it didn't crash the way I expected. Usually what happens is that there's a big buyout, prices spike, and then by Tuesday the following week, the price starts to reset, and this is taking 2 or 3 times longer than I really expected. I still would steer clear as an industrialist, but I would be watching as a trader to buy something in maybe a sub 175 million-ish range. Again, the volume on this is so low, it's really hard to give good advice here, but that's what I have at the moment. Ishtar was another interesting one we brought up last week, that supplies had surged, prices had dived, and I thought it was a halfway decent buy-in at sub 180. Looks like prices have recovered to 200. I don't think they're going to go much higher than 200, but given that supplies might be a little bit thin, we could see a 205 sort of action over the weekend. But just as likely, Weekend Warriors could dump this back down to 195. So anywhere in that bound, I think, is where we're going to end up. And Jump Freighters, we've been watching these since Burn Jita. Again, interesting that Anshars took a big spike, but Reyes did not. I guess people just don't use Reyes like I like to use Reyes. So what's interesting on this graph, though, is the dip in ARCs. So if you're watching the market right now and you have an extra 7.25 billion-ish to spend, ARCs are looking a little on the cheap side. But, God, making back those fees, man, speculating on Jump Freighters would be quite a market to be playing. And last, but certainly not least, let's cover our violence report. Things are looking normal for the week. We still see Rorquals bringing up a big chunk of the destroyed list. I do need to fix one of our data streams so we can actually track the new kills on the excavator drones, which is fine. That's great. Vexor Navy issue continues to be a strong contender in the meta, and rattlesnakes were really popular this week, so that's at least somewhat interesting. There's also Proteus and Tengu are making a bit of a comeback, so if you wanted to speculate on ships, those might not be bad hulls to take a little bit more investigation in. When I did my quick pass over them, I didn't see anything worth saying on the show to 100 people or 1,000 viewers, but it's not a bad piece if you wanted to do the investigation yourself. There might actually be, I might have just missed something and you can look like a super genius. Hot systems, we see Jita is hotter than usual. Amamake is back on the list. It hasn't been on the list for a very long time. But Burn Jita washed out our scales. And Black Rise, Catch, Placid, Citadel, and Forge, bringing up our list. That we're not seeing more nullsec on that list, more low-sec nullsec on that list is a little bit weird. To get both Citadel and Forge on the top 5 list is a little bit weird. But again, we're just not seeing the amount of PvP I'd really expect to see. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring this show to a close. I want to thank everybody who tuned in live, and I want to thank our editor, Christopher Mellen, for editing this show up for all of the guys who can't tune in live. If you do want to tune in live, you can catch us every week on Friday at 0300 game time. That's Thursday night, 8 o'clock Pacific, on Twitch and YouTube at Eve Prosper. If you want to follow the show, all you got to remember is Eve Prosper. That'll get you to Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and our blog. And if you want to talk to me, if you want to talk to our community of trade people, do join our Discord. Links should be down in the doobly-doo below. Thank you, everybody who tuned in live. If you do enjoy the show, if you enjoy what we do and the kind of attention to detail we give in this show, do consider supporting us on Patreon. We provide this show free of charge, no ads, week over week. We provide custom dev fleet work, a lot of back-end code to make this thing happen, and it is not a solo effort. So if you can support us, if you enjoy what we do consider throwing a buck in the tip jar. It'd be basically like buying me a beer. If you can't support us, that's perfectly fine. Do get subscribed. Like every good industrialist and economic guy, I like seeing numbers going up and to the right. So get subscribed, get notified, watch us live, watch us on YouTube. We will be back next week with more market news. I have been your host, Lockefox. This has been the Eve Prosper Show. Fly safe and make a bunch of money.